Hey guys, so today we've got my first 2023 NHL mock draft. So this is my first one for the 2023 draft, and I am also going to probably do a 2024 mock draft soon, so this is actually more of a draft rankings than a mock draft. So I'm going to be ranking my top 15 players for this class, and obviously we don't know what the seed's going to turn out like next year, how the teams will do, but so the teams here, it's not actually a mock draft. The teams are just here to show who kind of could be in the range of selecting these players. And this is kind of my predictions for how the teams will do, but obviously it's going to turn out completely different. So obviously the draft is still very far away. We haven't seen these players draft years, which is obviously the most important year for the draft. So we're still missing that 1 year, and obviously this is going to change a lot, but this is my rankings as of right now. I would like to mention that the 2023 draft is absolutely stacked. I think it's the best draft in 2015, which could end up being like the best draft class of all time. This class is just stacked from the top to bottom. So much depth. It's amazing at the top, potentially the next, like 2015, the next McDavid, Eichel, or a lot of people have been drawing comparisons to Crosby and Ovechkin there at the top two, which are very high regard, but I wouldn't necessarily completely disagree with it. So starting off at number 1, we have Conor Bedard. I think he's easily the best player in the draft. No surprise here. He put up 100 points in 62 games with the Regina Pats of the WHL. I think one day he is going to overtake Connor McDavid as the best player in the NHL. Obviously that won't happen for a while, but once McDavid kind of starts to get older in his 30s, I think we could definitely see Bedard as he enters in his prime in the next 10 or so years, end up being that number 1 best player in the NHL. And before that, he will kind of still be that number 2 player, but I think he was already the best player, one of the best players in the CHL. His draft year -1. And he put up 20 points in 15 games as a 15-year-old in his exceptional status year. As the youngest player in the CHL, youngest player in the WHL. It's absolutely crazy. The Hurricanes put up 2 points per game, 7 points last year, and he put up 7 points in 4 games within the UA teams this past year, and it's going to be playing in the World Juniors U20s this year, so that'll be very interesting to see. But I think he's going to be by far the best player in the CHL this upcoming year, because he was already one of the best players in the CHL this year, and all those guys that he's going to be competing with, those top guys, are all going to be going to the NHL for the most part. So he's going to be kind of alone there at the top, and he looks absolutely dominate. He put up 51 goals and 49 assists last year. His shot is probably his best quality. It's amazing, but he's also just all around dynamic, amazing offensive player with great skating. He really has no holes. He's not like a mess defensively either, but yeah, he's just so good. His hands are incredible. His highlight reel is crazy. He's really good. He's made some incredible plays, and he just dominates the defense and makes them look like they're trash. It's incredible to watch as the draft year -1, and I think he's already good enough to play in the NHL. And he's the best prospect since McDavid in 2015. I think one of the best players coming out of the draft we've ever seen in the NHL history. Now, at number 2, we've got a guy who could end up being one of the best second overall picks of all time in Michkov. So the big thing with him is that there are concerns that his contract in the KHL goes up until 25-26. So he's going to spend likely 3 years in the KHL after he gets drafted, before coming to the NHL, even though he's going to be NHL ready. Although there is, I think, some stipulations of contract or whatever. So I think we could see him coming in earlier before his contract expires, but I think that definitely concerns teams, along with the whole conflict in Russia as well. As another concerning factor, I don't think Michkov is on the same level as Bedard. I think Bedard's just leveled up. He's a true generational prospect, whereas Michkov, I wouldn't say he's a true generational, but he's kind of in the borderline there. He's still one of the best draft prospects in that top tier of draft prospects we've seen over the last decade or so. He's absolutely amazing. He's dominated every level that he's played on. He has 5 points in 13 games in the KHL, so the second best league in the world. He puts up 5 points in 13 games. So, really good numbers, and one of the second best league in the world behind the NHL as a 16-year-old is absolutely incredible. He completely dominated the UA teams before putting up as many points as more than Bedard. The thing is, though, that he's actually a year older. I think he was born in October. He's an 03. So that's one thing. He is a bit older than Bedard. He got held back. So he's going to be an older player, but still, absolutely incredible player. Great shot, great everything. So much skill. He is a bit of a liability defensively, though, and his off-the-puck play is a bit suspect, which I think is a bit of a worry with him. But I think his offense is so good. He's such an amazing player with the puck, and I think he is going to be one of the best players in the NHL one day. At number 3, we have Adam Vantilli, the number 3 guy who I think He could go first overall in some of the previous years, and he would go second overall in most drafts. He's that type of player. I've had my concerns about him recently, but he was so good. 74 points in 54 games with the Chicago Steel of the USHL. It's really good numbers, absolutely dominating in that league as a 16-year-old is incredible. He's a pretty big, I think he's 6'3", he's a pretty big center, and he's going to be an elite #1 center in the NHL, not even like a franchise level center. He's so good. He pulled up the Michigan in the USHL. He has a great mixture of size, but also having great speed and skill. Size is not really his only thing, but he has size, but he has that elite speed and skill, and he's also very NHL. He's also very NHL ready, so I think the upside is not really close to Bedard and Michkov, but those are, generational, borderline generational prospects we're looking at. I think Vantilly will still be an elite #1 center in the NHL. I think we could see him being a top 20, 15 player, or top 10 player. I think he could be a top 10 player in the NHL one day. Which goes to tell me we could see 3 top 10 players in the NHL coming out of this draft. But he's very NHL ready. He could play in the NHL today, and he's an amazing prospect. Even though the upside isn't as high as the top 2, he's still going to be a fantastic player. At number 4, we have Carlson. I'm a big fan of him. He's really risen up recently, and especially for me, I think he's still quite underrated. He put up 9 points in 35 games in the SHL with Orego, which is just, I think people don't recognize how phenomenal that is as a draft year -1. Most players play in the J20 in the draft year -1. Only a few players, not many players play in the SHL. And when they do, they usually maybe play a few games there. After playing most of the year in the J20, they get called up and you don't really do much in the SHL. But Carlson was able to hold his own in the full season as a center, playing in the SHL. He 9 points in 35 games, which is pretty solid production. So I think next year we can really see him getting that lead, already having experience in probably the 3rd best league in the world, the top Swedish pro league. Already playing pro hockey at 16. Next year is going to be 17, and we could definitely see production putting up, I think, over half a point per game. Which is very good. That's elite production, and I think he will be an elite #1 center in the NHL. He's a top 3 prospect in most drafts. He's an absolutely incredible player. He's a great passer with great vision, and he's going to be a top tier playmaker in the NHL. Number 5, we have Zach Benson. I'm a big fan of him. The one thing is he's really small, but I think skill-wise, talent-wise, he definitely deserves to be in the top 5. His size, though, he's only 5'8", which is the big reservation for people, which is why you may not see him in as many. I think there's still a lot of people who have him in their top 5s, but he is a bit lower on other people's lists because of that. Even though he's still such a good player, I think the talent and skill is unreal, and I think the potential-wise, he could end up being, I think, a top 15 player in the NHL. He's just so good. With the Winnipeg Ice, he put up 63 points, 58 games, so over a point per game. He is, I think, naturally a center, but he played most of the year as the left wing on an absolutely stacked team. The Ice had Ben Matthews there. On defense, Carlson Lambos. I remember Conor Mcgregor as well. So those are 2 centers, Savoy and Geeky, that they had. So he kind of had to shift to the wing. But Geeky's probably going to stay there, and also maybe Savoy, he might go to the NHL. I think we're going to keep him another year, though, but we'll see what happens. But even with that team, not only I think was Savoy helping Benson was helping Savoy. I think he's a better prospect than Savoy, definitely, easily Geeky, but also Savoy. Small, but he still is very good defensively. He's good for his size. He does what you want, but the talent, the skill, the puck skills, he can be a very good playmaker and goal scorer in the NHL. At number 6, we have Dalibor Dvorsky. He's another guy I'm a big fan of. He put up 40 points in 33 games in the J20 league, so that's the real thing that I have Leo Carlson over him, as he played in the SHL, even though Dvorsky had great numbers in the J20 league. He still wasn't playing in that pro league, whereas Leo Carlson did some really impressive numbers as a draft year -1 in the SHL in the top flight there. But he's going to be playing with AIK. So he actually did play 17 games with AIK in the Allsvenskan, which is the number 2 league in Sweden. So not quite good as the SHL, but still pro, still really good. He got 3 points, so not as impressive as Leo Carlson in the league. Still good numbers. He's a fantastic skater. He's a good shot, and the big thing about him is his hockey IQ. His hockey IQ and smarts is top-notch, but I think will lead him to being an elite #1 center in the NHL. 7, we have Brayden Yeager. He's another interesting player. Another guy coming out of the WHL. He put 59 points in 63 games with the Montreal Warriors. But he's a really good player, so offensive production is still very good, but maybe doesn't scream necessarily top 10, and some of the guys behind him do have better production, purely based on a statistics standpoint. However, Yeager is an excellent two-way player. He's a great 200-foot game and is great defensively, which I think is one of the big reasons why he is here at number 7. At number 8, we have Nate Danielson. He's another guy I'm a big fan of, and like Yeager, he's an excellent two-way game. He's a great 200-foot player, so he's coming in from another WHL player. So a lot of really good WHL players in this draft, obviously headlined by Bedard. He put up 57 points in 53 games. So I think I could easily see him surpassing Yeager, Forsky, and even being a top 5 pick. He's a really good player that I think a lot of people have really started to put in their top 10s, top 15s, although there's still people having him outside. But he's elite. He's an excellent player. He's great offensively, but also has an elite 200-foot defensive game as well, which I think is huge. So he'll be a very good first-line center in the NHL. So coming in at number 9, we have Edward Sale. So Edward Sale played in the Czech U20 League as a left wing, and his production is, just blows the roof off. He put up 89 points in 39 games in the Czech U20 League. So obviously, even the Czech U20 isn't even close as good as the Swedish U20, the Finnish U20 League as well. But it's still, the top Czech League is still it's still top tier pro league in Europe. The U20 League is no slob itself, and he absolutely dominated. 89 points in 39 games is absolutely incredible, and I think he's potential to be very good first on left wing. But we'll see what he can do in the pro league next year, which could cause him, I think, could drop a little bit if he kind of disappoints. But if he continues this, keeps on this production, I think we could see him going even higher. So next up at number 10, we have Andrew Crystal, yet another WHL player. He put up 69 points in 61 games with the Kelowna Rockets of the WHL. So very good production, very good numbers, and he's a wizard with the puck. He has a great highlight reel. He's got amazing hands, and he's a very dynamic offensive player, like a lot of players in this draft. So I think he has potential to be an elite first-line guy. He's great offensively. His defense may be a bit of a worry, but that point total is really good. And if you watch a bit of his tape, his offensive production is also very good. At 11, we have Casper Faulkenman, another very good player, and he is the top Finnish player off the board here. He put up 38 points in 41 games with the Jokerit in the Finnish U20 League. So very good production there. 38 points in 41 games. Not quite as impressive as guys like Dalibor Dvorsky. Still, he's a true power forward. He's 6'4", and plays a similar game. A guy like Gabriel Landeskog, maybe even a bit of Matthew Tkachuk in him. He's a true power forward who uses his size very well at 6'4", but also is very fast, has great speed for his size, and also has great skill as well, which is really what you want to see. These guys with really high skill paired with that size. Having just a lot of size doesn't work anymore. Halttunen is a very skilled player as well and is very fast, so I think this could lead to being a very good player, and I think the upside is definitely there for Casper Halttunen. Not only is he super skilled, but he's really able to get into those dirty areas and do all those things like a true power forward, which I think could cause teams to really like him, and he could go quite high and definitely find himself in the top 10. At number 12, we have Will Smith. So yet another Will Smith. There's just a ton of Will Smiths. Obviously, you've got the actor, and then around the sports world, 2 baseball players. Now the Astros catcher and the Astros reliever and the Dodgers catcher Will Smith. Because you had another one coming out of the US NTDP. He's a great player, and some people think that he could kind of have a Cooley jump where he's maybe kind of seen as kind of a first-round guy, but not necessarily a top 10, maybe top 15. And some people think he could end up being a top 10, or even could be a top 5 guy in this draft. And I think he's a very interesting player. He put up 37 points in 35 games, so he's a top US NTDP. He put up those numbers with the U17 team, and he even got called up to play with the U18 team. But he's a guy who kind of next year is a make or break year. If it goes well, he's going to get those minutes as that number 1 center probably on that U18 team. And if it goes well, I think he could definitely see himself being a top 10 prospect. He has a lot of size. He's a big player, kind of like Halttunen. Plays kind of a grindy type game, and his speed, although it's not quite as good as Halttunen, he still has good speed. And I'll definitely take a guy like Casper Halttunen over Will Smith. I think Will Smith, if he ends up proving that he also, he does have good skill, if he can end up really unlocking it next year, since the one concern is there's nothing he's really elite at, but if he can end up unlocking that potential, that skill that I think he has, he's going to see himself being a top 10 prospect in this draft. At number 13, we have Alex Ciernik. So he's quite an interesting player here, and I think he's kind of all over the board for a lot of people. But I think his production is pretty hard to ignore. 47 points in 43 games with the Swedish J20 League. He plays both lanes, and he's actually still that player playing in Sweden. But yeah, he's an excellent player, and I think with that production, he can be a very good first-line winger. At 14, we have Lindsey, the top defenseman. So the one thing with this class is usually we see 1 or 2 top elite defensemen in the draft. This year it was Simon Max and David Jiricek. We've seen Jamie Drysdale and Sanderson, although I would definitely take Drysdale for Sanderson for 2020. Byram in 2019. In 2021 we saw quite a lot of defensemen around the top there. This year it's not necessarily the case, but I think I have Lindsey as my top defenseman. We also have guys like Lukas Dragicevic and Cameron Allen as well, some very good defensemen, as well as a couple others, but there's no true elite ones. Although Lindsey kind of plays a similar style to Max, he has great mobility and IQ, which can be very good puck-carrying defenseman. And finally, at 15, we have Otto Spenberg. Otto Spenberg has fallen a little bit over this past year, but I think he still looks to be a very good prospect. His brother's actually Ivor Spenberg. He was one of the top 2 guys, him and Ryan McGregor, for the 2026 draft. Ivor Spenberg is in 07. And Otto Spenberg put up 35 points in 38 games for Lundis J20 League in the SHL, in the J20 League. He's a very good center who I could see being quite a pretty good top 6 center in the NHL. So there is my list, and I actually like to mention some honorable mentions. There's a lot of guys, this is a stat class of 7, there's a lot of guys who were close but just missed. So Lukas Dragicevic, Quentin Muskie, so Matthew Wood's actually a guy I'll talk about the Friday night, Cone Zimmer. These are all guys that were pretty close to making it. Callum Ritchie as well. I think he was very close to being my number 15 guy. Although Otto Spenberg slightly edged him out, but Callum Ritchie could really end up proving. I think he could end up being a top 10 pick in the draft come draft time. There's a lot of potential to be unlocked there for next year. But Matthew Wood, so some people even have him in the top 10. He's a very flashy player, and I don't have him on my list. I don't really know what to think of him. I actually do have a lot of thoughts. He put up 85 points in 46 games in the BCHL and Junior A. So we've seen, I think, a lot. Like Makarov is obviously came out of the AJHL. You're seeing all these guys who are good. I mean, Kent Johnson played before coming to college in his draft year. He played in the BCHL. So a lot of good guys coming out of these Junior A leagues. However, Matthew Wood, his highlight reel is crazy. And by looking at that, you think he's definitely a top 15, if not top 10 guy in this draft. However, I think he's a very, very boomer bust guy who has really high upside, but could end up even fizzling out come the time he has to play in the WHL. That's the kind of guy I look at him as he doesn't have great speed. He kind of looks even like kind of average pace. He's really hard to notice out there when he doesn't have the puck watching his tape, but I think the potential is there. So I hope you enjoyed it. Comment what you think. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.